Well, I don't want to tell you yet, but, but it's going to be very, very interesting also. So I just want to say thank you. And welcome everyone to this talks. Where we have, as I said before, people from different countries, not only English speakers, we're going to try also to have French, people from France, maybe German, different countries, because this is a cultural talk, right? Yeah, we practice the language. For example, here today you are invited to ask questions at the end. We're going to have about 10, 15 minutes for different questions, not only here on site, so for people that are in the top YouTube, I think. Okay, good. So again, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Claire and Douglas. You're welcome. We're going to do the introduction of all of you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. In the e-card that you received, the title of the talk is Ukraine-Russian conflict from three different perspectives. And we said three different perspectives because we had invited three people. Shubham Garg from India, Craig Cottrell from England, and Douglas Green from the United States. And we also had someone else from France. So in that way, we would have different perspectives about this conflict. Today, we want to thank, Shubham is here, he finally connected. Shubham Garg is from India. He is one of our professors, and he's actually in India now. He is connected from India. We also, welcome, Shubham. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Ruben.
Okay, we have Douglas Green, who is actually in the United States right now, and he's one of our professors too at the Language Center. So he's going to give us his perspective from the American viewpoint. Welcome, Douglas.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Okay, and we also have here Craig Cottrell. I don't know what's wrong with his camera, but he's working on it. Craig Cottrell is from England. He's not in England now. He's in Belgium, but he is from England, and he's going to give us this perspective. Okay. As we said at the end, we have 10 minutes to ask questions. You can ask any questions. And we also invite the people who are connected on YouTube to write their questions on the chat, and we will be pleased to answer these questions. Okay, Craig is here. His camera is working. Hello, Craig.
Hi. How's it going?
Great, thank you so much. Okay, now we can start with the questions. So I would kindly ask the people in charge to show and share with us the presentation about the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. As you know, this is a conflict that started in February and that it has affected us, and it will affect us in the future too. All right? We don't know what effect this conflict is going to have in the coming years to us, to our population. Okay, very good. So here we have the e-card in the first place, the e-card that you probably saw. I already talked to the people. I would like to go to the next slide. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, the next slide, please. Well, they're taking a while. Who can help us with the next slide there? Ingresa, okay, all right, thank you. Okay, we will have the possibility here to see the questions that we are going to ask our guests, and we will be answering them randomly. There's not a specific order to answer the questions. And let's see what happens with the presentation. Thank you for being here. We have some students from economy, international business, from the Language Center. We have some professors at the Language Center. Thank you for being here. Thank you for accepting the invitation. And we will keep working on these events as time goes by. Okay, there's some issues with that. Okay, well, meanwhile, let's see. Okay, Douglas, would you like to share something with us about this conflict? Douglas, what's your perspective?
Yeah, well, I think the first question that often comes to mind is, why is the United States so engaged in this conflict as they are in every conflict? And really, the truth is that the United States are often criticized for being too involved in conflicts, but we're also typically the first country called to help in these conflicts, either with humanitarian aid or military aid. Ukraine has criticized us for not helping enough with the military, whether that be fighter jets or enforcing a no-fly zone. And United States citizens, they've criticized our leaders for not being more involved. And other countries have criticized us as well. So one reason why we're so involved in this conflict is because there's an expectation for us to be. Also, this conflict is really popular with the American people. President Zelensky is like a rock star for a lot of the American people. A lot of the American people have a lot of sympathy for the Ukrainian people. And the media has done a very effective job of portraying Ukraine as a very sympathetic place in this conflict. Finally, there's a lot of crises happening in the United States right now. We've got serious problems with inflation, serious problems with crime, and often you'll see policymakers in our country try to shift the focus away from domestic issues in order to, get people involved in something else. So I think our engagement in this war is largely due to an expectation of us being involved and popular support domestically.
I would like to add something there to what Douglas said. Thanks. Hi, Doug. Since I think like two major factors. One, because Russia is involved, so given the history between the two countries, there's always whenever Russia is involved in a global level conflict, the US is part of that discussion because the negotiations finally happened between those two countries. And NATO, as an organization, officially, unofficially, it's led by the US. So, as Russia proclaimed, it has accused NATO of invading its or breaking away from its previous agreements. So, US is the one that responds to such accusations. So, the United States has to be involved in such a situation, I guess.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that as well. I mean, the question is, why wouldn't the US be actively engaged? I mean, they've been competing with the Soviet Union, as Russia was previously, in space, in the military, in every aspect, in sport. So Putin was a member of the Soviet Union's KGB, so he still has that link, and I think it's only natural that the United States would be proactive in this conflict.
Okay, yeah. I want to thank you for answering this first question. And before we go on, I would like to introduce you to our fourth guest. His name is Jonah, and Jonah is from France. So it's important for us to have also this perspective from France, as we could hear Doug, his perspective from the United States viewpoint, Craig from England, and Shuran from England. Now let's listen to Jonah. Thank you for accepting this invitation to be here. And let's see, in general terms, what's your perspective about this conflict?
Thank you very much. First of all, sorry for being late. Yeah, so regarding to this first question, unfortunately, I don't know what have been said so far, but my opinion is that, like I just heard right now, NATO is involved. So as NATO being involved, US is also involved because, I mean, indirectly, US is in charge of NATO. Because if it was not like that, I don't see really why US should be involved. And they are, for instance, now protecting NATO's interests in Europe. As you know, since Cold War, NATO more or less took the advantage in Europe, and they are positioned all alongside Russia. And I think this is why all this conflict is coming, is starting, is because there is some fear that, I mean, in the Russian perspective, there is some fear that NATO is trying to progress these lines. So I think this is why there is this conflict directly between Russia and Ukraine, but indirectly between Russia and US.
Thank you, Jonah, for your appreciations about this matter. Let's turn to the next question. Next slide. Next. Okay. Now, as a second question here, we have how widespread could this conflict get? And this question, to a point, has to do with us, because we are part of this world, and at some point, indirectly, we will be affected, right? In terms of, different aspects, which I don't want to go deep into. I'm not the guest, but it's important that we can hear this perspective. So start with Shubhan, for example. In India, you're in India now, and I wonder what people think there, or how scared they are, if they are scared, about this question. How widespread could this conflict get?
Thanks, Ruben. Right now, people in India are still very disconnected from this conflict because geographically, it doesn't really impact India right now. It's more of it's still, even after like almost 3 months, it's still a European conflict, and people in India see it that way. One of the major reasons for like its containment, that it hasn't spread into Asia, is because of China and India both, that have maintained a certain level of neutral position, neutrality towards, although they have been indirectly supporting Russia, I would say, but not very actively. And it makes a lot of sense for both countries not to get actively involved in the conflict, because the entire conflict is based on territorial uh, uh, conflict between Russia and NATO, which doesn't really concern both these countries. But it can spread if, like for example, today itself, Russia stopped, Russia announced that it would not provide gas to, I think, two countries, Poland and Bulgaria. So it is like the conflict is becoming more complex in that regard. And India and China both are buying Russian oil, which is against Western sanctions. So I think this conflict has the potential to spread into Asia, but maybe we need to wait a few more weeks or a few more months to see if we can't find a solution to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the answer. And you're right. The geographical position of India, as our geographical position, we are far away from this conflict, but it may have some effect due to the proximity to China, as you mentioned. Well, and NATO does not care much about this part of the world, as you mentioned. Thank you so much. Douglas, in the United States, do you think that this, even though the United States is far away from this area, do you think that it will get there at some point?
Well, I guess it depends on how you define get involved. When all this started, you look at the stock market, things were starting to crash a little bit. So I think as far as, talking about the Russia-Ukraine border, I think that Russia has a limit to its military and financial resources, even if they have more than Ukraine. But they've got Ukraine has a lot of global resources and support, and NATO is clearly united. So I think that has to concern Russia as far as moving further into Europe. I think the bigger concern, which I was alluding to before, would be if other countries start looking to make moves, such as China and North Korea, and that would really start making things get pretty serious and seeing more of our involvement and more effect on us. I think one thing that Russia looked at and China looked at was what happened with the United States last year in Afghanistan. We withdrew from Afghanistan and immediately everything fell apart there. And we just kind of washed our hands and said, we're done here. So I think that has a big impact on how far things could spread. I think that if NATO sends troops to Ukraine, then you could see some sort of global escalations happening, both on the Ukraine-Russia border and then maybe China, Southeast Asia, and things like that. So I don't think that things are going to escalate, but I think if we escalate things, then things could escalate, if that makes sense.
Hello. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you, Douglas, for that perspective. And I don't know if Jonah or Craig would like to add something.
Yeah, I don't want to, yeah, sorry. I don't want to take on the further questions that will come, but as far as the question is how widespread could this conflict go? So I don't know if we are talking about actual conflict, actual war, but if we are talking about actual consequences, I think as far as I understand, all the world is concerned because we are talking about a war. Everybody has an opinion on that. Everybody is not comfortable with having a war, killing people and stuff. So as far as that, as information, I think it's widespread. As far as consequences regarding also, I think it's question 6 or 5, but how it can impact the rest of the world. We have to remind that both Ukraine and Russia are first exporters in the world, and they export a lot of raw materials. And well, I will stop here because we will discuss on that after that. But I think it concerns all the world. And I think we saw that when there were a UN vote about this war, all the countries were concerned and all the countries voted. There is a very few countries that took out their vote. So I think everybody is concerned as far as I think.
Okay, yeah, this definitely has to do with the whole world. We are there too, part of it. Thank you. Craig, you were going to say something too?
Yeah, well, I think there's the possibility of mistakes which could escalate the situation. I mean, there've already been missile strikes close to the Polish border. So if one were to enter Poland, then that would, by its very nature, involve the whole of NATO, because obviously Poland is a member of NATO. So it only takes something like that to make something escalate. There's another aspect as well. I don't know if you know about a place called Transnistria. So Transnistria is a place in Moldova, and it's a region that wants to become autonomous. it's pro-Russia. And apparently Ukraine fired some missiles into a town in this area in Moldova. So it's very easy to see how satellite countries can become involved.
Yeah, absolutely. We cannot be sure of what's going to happen. Yes, because we don't know what Putin has in his head, in mind, and what the countries that belong to NATO, how they can react in case this overpasses or something goes wrong. Okay, we go on to question number 3. Next. Okay. This question has to do with NATO's role in this conflict. As you know, is this like a key factor in this crisis. And Craig mentioned that Poland is a member of NATO. So what is the role that NATO has in this conflict? Jenna, would you like to start?
Yeah, I don't know if we should go further than these questions. What is NATO role? Because we already talked about it in the first question, I would say. What should be NATO role, I think, would be a better question, is that I think NATO should be here to protect the society from wars. I mean, at least people that are part of NATO. And today they are trying to defend that. So at some point they have a role to bring peace, I would say, rather than activate war. I'm not saying that they are activating war, but so far there is a really shallow limit, and we are close to a war. I mean, a global war. I think that this morning, yesterday, First Minister of Russia was telling about nuclear weapons and stuff. So it's really escalating. And I think NATO's role should be of proposing or bringing peace, because they are representing a lot of countries, not only Russia or not only one country. I mean, in the side of Russia, it's only one country, or in the side of Ukraine, it's only one country. Rather than NATO is a lot of countries, so there should be bringing peace for this matter, I would say.
Okay, thank you so much. Doug, Shubham, or Craig, if you want to add something to this.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. Well, I think as far as an American is concerned, a lot of Americans in recent years, we question our own role in NATO. The defense spending of the United States is more than double the defense spending of all other NATO countries combined. More than 70% of NATO's funding comes from the USA, and almost 4% of our real gross domestic product is spent on NATO. So you hear a lot of Americans saying, why are we spending so much money on NATO? I think USA needs to be spending less money on defense and war, which means less money spent on NATO. I don't think the USA should be so involved in military operations abroad. And I don't think that Europe should be involved in our military operations, because they probably don't want to be either. Now, as far as NATO's role in Ukraine and Russia, I think it should be as limited as possible, and certainly no escalation beyond what we've already done. As I mentioned before, an escalation from NATO could mean an escalation from Russia and possibly from China. A lot of what we talked about here, it reminds me of World War I. Our last question was about, well, how widespread could this get? Well, I think the sky's the limit. It could get really widespread if there's more and more escalation. We've already seen a lot of economic and trade sanctions, which have really crushed the buying power of the Russian people. These are people who've done nothing wrong and can do nothing to change the situation, but they've seen their entire life's work totally wiped out. And this aggression from the United States and other countries, it's not going to cause regime change. Nothing's going to change. It's only going to punish these innocent people, which does not promote peace. So for me, I think we should be very careful without NATO proceeds.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Well, we can go to the next question. Next. Okay, do you think Ukraine will finally be able to defend its territory? As we have seen on TV, it hasn't been easy for Ukraine to stop Russian troops going into the country and bombarding and all that. So it's been hard, even though they've had some help from other countries, volunteer soldiers and other people that want to join and defend Ukraine. But still, we haven't seen any sign that this conflict or Ukraine is protecting or is able to protect its territory. But we would like to hear this from our guests. What about you, Shubham? Do you think Ukraine will finally be able to defend its territory?
Thanks, Ruben. I think it's not just about Ukraine in this matter. This question is highly related to the last question about NATO's role, because Ukraine has become like a middle ground for the conflict between Russia and NATO. And we need, I would just like to add, connected to the last question, we need to understand NATO is not a political alliance, although it has political consequences, or a trade alliance, it's a military alliance, right? So it was created just to avoid any such World War kind of a situation in the 1950s, I guess. And in this situation, Ukraine, and I think it has a political ideology that if you want the benefits of protection of this organization, you gather your politics or you organize your politics in the way we want. So it's kind of like a bully situation. It's the same situation for Ukraine right now, that if it wants to be part of NATO, which it has been trying to, then you do what we say. So it is like not just a Ukrainian situation in this case, and we all know that the NATO's political ideology is completely against Russian political ideology. So like now, as Doug also mentioned earlier, that a lot of weapons are being supplied to Ukraine from the US and other NATO countries. So this is becoming more difficult for Ukraine, in fact, because Russia is looking at this in a form of as an act of war from NATO. Although they are not directly attacking Russia, but helping Ukraine defend its territory is for them like an act of war against its sovereignty. So Ukraine will be able to defend its territory, and I think like right now Russia has also realized that it is very expensive, the war, to create this, to maintain all this war. And finally, what is the objective? Because Russia also needs to maintain its allies. So the propaganda that it has created, that it wants to defend the eastern Ukrainian region and liberate it from the neo-Nazi regime. So if it goes beyond that objective, I think it will also start losing support from countries like, especially like China. So I think Ukraine will be able to survive this, but there will be a reconfiguration of the regions finally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to also to add something else here, like the information that we get from TV, as you can see here, like Russia to invade Ukraine soon. All the information we get, we have to wonder, that information that we get is the real information. Is it really, is that what is really happening? And I would like to bring up this point, and I would like John to give us his perspective about this. Like, is it everything we watch on TV, is it what is really happening, or is just the way they want us to see that? What do you think, John?
Yeah, this is what I was thinking when I read this question at first. Is that I would say that on a military point of view, Ukraine has no chance against Russia, because I think if I'm correct, Russia's military expenses are like 50 times than those from Ukraine. But I think Ukraine has its chance with the information war. So far, Ukraine has succeeded in trying or hinting a vision where Ukraine is actually winning the war. When we see Twitter or any information, public information, we see a lot of information like today we won against Russia or against 40 soldiers. I don't know if you heard about the ghost soldier or something like this. He's a guy that is operating on the skies, and he could potentially kill 10 or more opponents in one day. I think yesterday we saw the same thing with a sniper from Canada or Australia, I don't remember, that is going to help Ukraine and is able to kill 40 people in one day. We all heard the story also of the 13 soldiers of an island of Ukraine that has been killed by the Russians. Afterwards, we confirmed that this was a lie, that the 13 soldiers were not killed. So in this perspective, Ukraine is able to manage to put pressure on the international community. And this is what they are doing now, because they are telling that they are this close to win the war, and they only need some really a few help from NATO or from Europe or from Germany or whatever. And regarding this, as I said, military speaking, I don't think they will be able to respond to Russia, but with the information they give, they can convince people to help them so that they at the end defend their territory. This is the first question.
Okay. I would like to see if Craig or Shuvan or Douglas would like to add something about this question.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'd like to say. First of all, you're correct with the idea about propaganda in the media and the images that they show us, the stories that they tell us. It's evident that there are particular narratives being pushed. So it's very difficult to filter the news and understand what's really going on. One example of this was supposedly a helicopter being destroyed by the Ukrainian army, and it was actually a video game. So this was pushed as being true, but on further investigation, they discovered that it was completely false. So these are the things, especially now with social media, we're victims of information, and it's very difficult, as I said, to be able to say what's true and what's not.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up this issue about media and how media can manipulate us, showing things that we may think are true, and actually are not. I didn't know about this thing with the helicopter. There was a video game, and it was proven that it's true. There's a video game. So that's kind of weird. And this gives us a different perspective about this conflict. Okay, good. Let's turn to the next question. Okay. So, well, I think we have at some point answered this question, like how have people from the rest of the world reacted to this crisis? We have discussed this and what we can or cannot do about it. Okay, so we can go to the next question, question 6. Okay. What will the future geopolitical situation look like after this war? It is more like a change. What changes are coming? How can we see the future after the war? How is this war going to affect the geopolitical situation in the world? Okay, let's see. Probably Douglas, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, I think for better or for worse, the United States will be seen as less eager to intervene. I mean, we have intervened quite a bit, but I mean, if this had happened 30 years ago, I think we would have been a lot more involved. So if we're seen as less eager to intervene, I think this could be seen as a green light for other countries to make moves that they want to make. Russia was warned, hey, don't go into Ukraine or there's going to be consequences, and they went ahead and did it anyway. So maybe other countries will see this as an opportunity to do the same thing. I think that Europe or European countries may be inspired to increase their defense spending due to Russia's willingness to go into Ukraine despite being warned. I think Germany, I saw some report where they increased their defense spending significantly for the first time in a long time. And as I mentioned before, after Afghanistan and also after Ukraine, I'm sure countries will be looking at the United States and saying, wow, you know, they're not going to come in and save the day when things go bad. Maybe we should start spending more on defense. You know, again, going back, a lot of people are looking at China and Taiwan, that situation over there. And I think that most countries we're so dependent on China's exports, or we owe money to China, or we have some business dealings with China, that there won't be a serious reaction to Chinese military aggression. So in short, you know, I think the United States is going to become more isolationist, and other countries are going to see that as an opportunity to make a step forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's very interesting to see how the United States will be seen and considered in the future regarding protecting the countries, and then it would strengthen their protection, right, in the countries. Thank you so much.
Can I just say something, Ruben?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, with regard to China, I think it's impossible that the surrounding countries allow China to take Taiwan. I just don't think it's on the table. Why? Because Taiwan produces 60% of all semiconductors for microchips. So to allow China to dominate that aspect would be terrible for global trade first, but it also would embolden China in establishing its claims on all of the South China Sea and all of the islands that have different claims with Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Japan, and South Korea. So if it allows them to embolden themselves, then they're going to reap the consequences of that. And there are already organizations and alliances involved in defending this situation. So there's, I don't know if you know, something called the Quad, which is the United States, India, Japan, and Australia. That's specifically set up to negate Chinese aggression in the region.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I don't know, John.
Ruben, sorry. I
Yes,
would
sir.
just would like to add another point that it can also be turned into a currency war. It's the first time that trade is being like promoted and done more intensely in the Chinese currency with the with Saudi Arabia selling oil to China in its local currency, and then Russia, because of the economic sanctions, demanding and paying for its debts in rubles. So, and we have been talking about the United States feeling a threat to the dollar, which it has in fact in the last 20 years in some indirectly weaponized to, like, you know, for its political goals. So that would be pretty interesting to see, like, how the use of currency changes over the next 10 to 20 years. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yes, we kindly remind those people who are watching us on YouTube to fill out the form that you will find there. Please do so to check your attendance and everything. It's pretty short. And now, well, unfortunately, time is short, and we're going to move to the questions, right? So we're going to have questions from those who are on YouTube, and also like to hear the questions that you may have here. The people who are here now will be more than willing to answer your questions. The guests will be more willing to answer your questions. So do we have questions from YouTube? Okay, so let's go with the first question.
Hi, so we have here Carlos Albeiro Lopera Martinez, and he's asking, does the matter of being Jewish have to do with this conflict?
No, for me, I don't think so. I don't see any relation with being Jews and the conflict. I think it's more about, I mean, in the team point of view, it's all about defending Russian country and Russian people. and from the Ukraine side as well. And as we discussed, there is a third side, which is NATO, and NATO as well is defending all the line, all Europe, all the Europe line. There is no, so far as I heard, anything about Jews or something like this.
Okay. What about the others? If you have any insights about this? Do you find any connection between being Jewish and this war?
I guess I agree with Jonah. Like there's an ongoing parallel conflict going on in Israel and Palestine, but I don't think it's connected with this particular conflict.
Okay. We have no more questions from YouTubers or YouTube watchers, no YouTubers. I wish we had some YouTubers here watching us. Okay, and well, we have a very interesting public here. Maybe you've been listening to these important guests, discussing about this important topic, and we would like to hear from you questions. I guess you are full of questions. You have many questions in your head. Unfortunately, we cannot answer all of them. We're short of time. But we would love to hear a couple of questions. Okay, there's one question there.
I'm sorry. What?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Very sorry.
Hi. Actually, it's not exactly a question, but more like a kind of a contribution. And to explain like the point of view I'm coming from, I'm Russian. I have a Ukrainian last name, and I live in France. So that's it. And it's actually about the sixth question, the question we have in front of us right now. And I think it's important to have in mind that there is like some implications and some consequences in the long run for Russia, for Ukraine, and for Europe. And for instance, I would like to point out that in Ukraine, even though like the war is still going on and we don't know how long it will last, but as for right now, like the many infrastructures are destroyed, as well as many like cultural elements. And I think like but UNESCO are just crying right now about it. For Russia, I think that if Putin dies in a like close future, maybe there will be a battle back from his friends. But then, if he doesn't, we can also kind of imagine a North Korean situation with further isolation of Russia. As for Europe in general, I think that the 5.3 million refugees that come from Ukraine also will change like the situation, the geopolitical situation, and will put like Europe in front of his contradictions and hypocrisy that they actually welcome the refugees from Ukraine, but they don't do the same thing with refugees from Afghanistan, Syria, or other countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor.
Thank you. My question is, because we already talked about NATO, but my question is more focused about the United Nations, specifically because we've had conflicts before, many conflicts before, but probably because of the time we're living in, because of social media, or because of a lot of people are listening, lots of people are actually concerned about what is happening. What's going to happen with the United Nations? Because right now people are expecting more from the United Nations, and we're getting exactly the same from the United Nations that we get before. And now finally people are noticing that, okay, this is what we get from the United Nations, but what is going to happen with them? Because I think, and I do believe that there's that's it. That's pretty much what we can get from the United Nations. Probably with the post-conflict, with the situation of the refugees is going to be helpful. But as war goes by, as the days go by, we see nothing really specific that people are asking for something from them. So what do you think about what is going to happen after or during this time of war with the United Nations in this specific conflict?
don't know if I can start, but I think yes. Thank you for the question. I think it all joins this question about the geopolitical future. In my opinion, the conflict is bringing the limits of all these organizations as United Nations, because they were here to prevent wars, to prevent what happened in the World War II. And actually, it is not. And this is one of the conflicts. I remember there were also other conflicts, like in Iraq, where United States also went across all laws and international laws. And today with Russia and Putin. So at some point, I would say that because there is a lot of parties involved in UN, it's really complicated to make a leader's move. If everybody can bring his veto, there is no decision taken. So as far as I understand, this kind of organization will have to be all reviewed, or the worst case scenario is that the whole world will go with a bipolarization. One side of the world will be more pro NATO, pro US, and these kind of Occidental forces, I would say, and the other side will go with China, Russia, and all this part of the world. This, I would say, in my opinion, is the worst case scenario. But yeah, like you said, UN had a role, and the organization were not able to prevent the war. I don't know how you guys think.
Also, another reason I feel with the lack of United Nations being able to do anything, we saw the same situation during COVID-19 pandemic when the entire world was like, no, China should answer for what originated there supposedly. But China is also is so powerful within the United Nations. And where does this power come from? Is because of the financing mechanism that United Nations has. So you need to understand that all these, like the United Nations as a whole and its sub-organizations, they all need a lot of money to run their operations. And who are the biggest financiers? The US, China, the European nations. So that is why I think Donald Trump, the major move that it made, like we will not fund the United Nations if it doesn't take any steps against China, because that is where the entire game comes to. So I think like that also needs to be revisited. Like the power of the vote doesn't necessarily have to be connected with the amount of money you contribute to the United Nations. Unless that happens, I think this system won't really see any change. Thank you.
Nope. All right. Yeah, Francisco here from the Conversation Club. I got a couple of questions. One is that should we worry about other countries bordering with Russia in this situation? For example, Finland and the whole Scandinavia territory. And what's your point of view about people even banning like Russian riders, Russian athletes from competitions and the art? What are the consequences of this war and what's going on with these people that have been like banned from these events?
I'll jump in real quick and answer this one. It's been just really stunning, just the reaction to the world against the Russian people who had nothing to do with this. Like, it's not their fault. And what's the consequence of this constant shaming of them is that they're going to be really upset at the West. And so what we're doing is we're creating a generation of people who are being punished when they didn't do anything wrong. And you see this all over social media. There's no worse insult than being called a Russian. Like, people are calling you a Russian if you say one thing that kind of reflects even neutrality on Russia. And so that was a great example. I mean, people are being banned from sporting events, really. that's not the way to go, and I think it's really sad that that's what's happened.
But at the same time, there is a precedent for that in 1980 and 1984, where, for example, the Olympic Games became politicized, and the Soviet Union or the United States didn't send a team of athletes because of the political situation at the time and the tensions that existed between the two superpowers.
No, and also I think like that generates more awareness, given that within Russia, because of the internet ban, a lot of Russian people don't really know what Russia's image is right now outside the country, and what is its own government doing, like its own actions in Ukraine. With when other countries are banning athletes, they have, because they represent in a way their own communities, so they at least get aware. Okay, so like and try to explore the reasons why that is like that situation is happening to them. So it kind of creates an internal pressure, I guess, because that has been a very big challenge for Putin right now, to maintain order within Russia. And so, yeah, I think what Craig said, this politicization of the issue is to create internal pressure within the country.
I'll just add one more thing. I also think it makes a difference if you are participating in sport under the flag. So if you're representing the country, then that's something which is a little bit more important, let's say. So, for example, talking about the football team in the World Cup, playing other countries, with the national anthem being played, I think that also is pretty significant. But as an individual athlete, maybe we can make a distinction there.
Yeah, so sorry, as far as your first question, which was if the surrounding countries could be invaded or something like this, maybe we can think about Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, that are really close to Russia. I don't think it will happen because they are part of NATO, and that would be a transgression, and there would be World War III, I would say officially. So I am not. I don't think this could happen. I mean, it could physically happen, but I don't think this is the first option. And then for the other questions about what is yeah, it was about sports and Russian people being sentenced at some point. I have to agree with my colleague that today Russian people, I mean, to be Russian is more or less seen like as an insult, and I don't think it's a good thing. But I think it's part of the whole narrative that I said earlier in the first or third question of Ukraine winning the war with information. As far as it concerns the war information, they are kind of winning in that matter. And I don't know if we can close with that, but just to remind that the last population, I mean the last people that felt insulted when we were talking about them were the Germans, right? Before the World War II, the Germans felt insulted because after the World War I, they were the blame for everything, and this is how Hitler came to power, right? So this is a really important thing to remember when we think about Russian, because as my colleague said, Russian people has nothing to do with that. It was Putin's decision. There were no vote about that, right? So just to have this in mind.
Okay, and one more thing about the first question that was asked. Russia have already been provocative in invading the airspace of Sweden with nuclear missiles. And the consequence of that was that Sweden and Finland are now applying for NATO membership. So it's had the opposite effect, basically.
Okay. All right. Well, we're getting to the end of this interesting conversation. We have many questions on YouTube. Unfortunately, we cannot answer them all. It's time to close this event. I would like to thank Douglas, Shubham, Craig, and Johnny for sharing your perspectives about this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And thank you for being here, listening to them, and also for the questions that you have asked, which have been very interesting. I want to invite you to coming events of open talks. We're going to have an event once a month. So in different ways and with very interesting topics. We started with this kind of political thing, but we're going to explore different areas. We're going to go into artificial intelligence. We're going to go into drama, art, different fields that are going to enlighten us a lot in different areas. And the fact that it's in English has a plus here. Like we can start using this language more often in the university. Thank you so much for being here today. Okay. Thank you, Craig, Shubham, and Douglas for your participation.
Thank you, Ruben, for the opportunity.
Thank you.